She thought moving into a quiet neighborhood meant peace, safety, and a fresh start. But for one black woman, stepping out of her car in front of her own home turned into a nightmare she never expected. A homeowners association member decided she didn't belong, demanding answers, threatening her presence, and determined to force her out. What began as a simple evening unraveled into a shocking confrontation that revealed deep prejudice, hidden fear, and a truth this Karen never saw coming. How could a single ID card turn an entire situation upside down? It was supposed to be a new chapter. After years of moving from one place to another during her military service, Danielle finally found a home where she could settle down. A modest townhouse in a quiet community. Nothing fancy, but filled with the promise of peace. Her days were simple now. Early morning jogs, tending to a small garden she was proud of, and the relief of knowing she had finally built something of her own. She wasn't just passing through anymore. This was her sanctuary. But sometimes peace is fragile. In neighborhoods like this, the rules weren't always written on paper. They lived in the glances, the whispers, the unspoken questions of who belonged and who didn't. Danielle sensed it the first week. The way some neighbors looked twice when she parked her car, or how conversations suddenly grew quiet when she walked by. It wasn't loud, not yet. Just the kind of silence that carried weight. She brushed it off, focusing on her routines, proud of everything she had earned. Yet, underneath that calm surface, tension was building. Because all it would take was one person, one stranger with too much power and too little understanding, to turn her quiet street into a battlefield. And that moment was coming faster than Danielle ever expected. The first signs came quietly. A notice taped to Danielle's door about unauthorized parking. Except it was her own driveway. Then, another letter warning her about improper use of community space, because she'd planted flowers along her porch. Small things, petty things, the kind of complaints that didn't seem serious until they kept piling up. And behind every one of them was the same name, the head of the HOA. A woman with a clipboard, sharp eyes, and an even sharper belief about who belonged in this neighborhood and who didn't. Danielle tried to ignore it. She paid her dues, followed the rules, and stayed respectful. But ignoring didn't stop the escalation. Soon, the woman was waiting outside when Danielle came home from work, arms crossed, questions loaded like weapons. Where do you work? How long are you planning to stay here? Not asked with curiosity, but with suspicion, like Danielle's very presence was an offense. Each interaction felt less like a neighborly concern and more like an interrogation. One evening, it all came to a head. Danielle pulled into her driveway after a long shift, only to find the woman blocking her path. Her car idled as the woman stepped closer, waving her arms, demanding proof that Danielle even lived there. The air was thick with hostility, and suddenly the street felt smaller, darker, as if the whole world had narrowed into this confrontation. Neighbors began to peek through blinds, some stepping onto porches, watching. But no one said a word. The silence cut deeper than any insult. It was the silence of people who saw injustice but chose distance over defense. Danielle's heart pounded as the woman raised her voice, threatening fines, even eviction, claiming she didn't look like she belonged. The words weren't just cruel, they were dangerous. In that moment, Danielle wasn't being treated as a homeowner, a veteran, or even a human being. She was being reduced to nothing more than the color of her skin. Every instinct told her to fight back, to shout, to defend herself. But another voice in her head, the one sharpened by years of service, by training to stay calm under pressure, urged restraint. She reached for her bag slowly, deliberately, as if every move was being judged. And in a way it was, because the wrong gesture, the wrong tone, could have been twisted into something far worse. She pulled out her wallet, her hand trembling, not from fear of who she was, but from the weight of what this moment represented. All around her, neighbors stood frozen, the air heavy with expectation. The HOA woman leaned forward, her words cutting like a blade. "Prove it. Show me you belong here." Danielle's grip tightened. Her military ID rested in her palm, the proof of years of sacrifice and service, the undeniable evidence of who she was. But before she revealed it, She paused, just long enough for the tension to reach its breaking point. Because this wasn't just about a card. It was about exposing a truth the HOA woman wasn't ready to face, and the neighborhood wasn't prepared to see. The air was electric with tension, every second stretching longer than it should. Danielle stood frozen in her own driveway, the weight of dozens of silent stares pressing against her back. The HOA woman's voice rose higher, sharp and accusing, insisting she didn't belong, that she was trespassing on property she had paid for with her own hard-earned money. The insults weren't just words anymore, they were an attack on her very existence, her right to simply be. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Danielle slowly opened her hand and held up her military ID. The laminated card glinted under the streetlight, a symbol of sacrifice, discipline, and a lifetime of service. For her, it was nothing new. It was just who she was. But for the HOA woman, it was like staring into a mirror she couldn't escape. The bravado drained from her face almost instantly. Her voice faltered. Her eyes flickered with panic, as if she had just pulled the pin on a grenade she couldn't throw away. She had demanded proof, and now the proof was undeniable. The woman who she tried to humiliate, harass, and push out of the neighborhood was a decorated veteran. Someone who had fought for the very freedoms this community enjoyed. The crowd shifted. Whispers rippled through the air. Those who had stayed silent now looked at Danielle with a mix of shame and disbelief, realizing what had just been exposed. The HOA woman's authority cracked wide open in front of everyone. Her prejudice revealed not just as ignorance but as weakness. For a brief moment, Danielle stood taller, her silence more powerful than any words. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fight. The truth was already louder than anything her accuser could say. And yet, as powerful as that card was, Danielle knew something deeper. That no ID, no rank, no title should be required to prove her humanity. Because this confrontation wasn't just about her victory. It was about a question that every neighbor watching would have to carry long after the night ended. The confrontation ended as quickly as it had begun. Danielle didn't shout, didn't retaliate. She simply stood her ground, military ID in hand, while the HOA woman shrank under the weight of her own actions. The neighbors who had watched silently now shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had witnessed not just a petty dispute, but a public unmasking of prejudice. For Danielle, it was vindication but not victory, because the truth was clear. She shouldn't have needed a badge of service to prove her right to exist in her own home. In the days that followed, the story rippled through the community. Some neighbors offered apologies. Others distanced themselves, pretending nothing had happened. The HOA leader avoided Danielle, her power cracked but not gone. And while the incident left Danielle stronger in her resolve, it also left her questioning how many others lived this same story. People who didn't have a military ID, a title, or a piece of proof to silence their accusers. That's the haunting truth. For too many, survival depends on validation that should never be required. Racism doesn't always come with slurs or violence. Sometimes it hides in the rules, the questions, the sideways glances, and the demand to prove you belong. And while Danielle's ID ended the confrontation, it didn't erase the deeper wound, the reality that without it, she might have been another victim of a system built to doubt her from the start. So the question remains, not just for Danielle's neighborhood, but for all of us. How many more people must stand on trial for simply existing before we accept that belonging isn't something to be earned, but a right we all share? Because racism isn't just a story from the past. It's a story still being written, one neighborhood, one street, one confrontation at a time. And the next chapter depends